Over the course of 35 years, 17 James Bond films thrill and entertain movie audiences worldwide. Each Bond adventure seems to break more box office records. Each new generation of filmgoers produces legions of new Bond fans. It is a legacy unparalleled in the history of movie making, and each film, from Dr. No to GoldenEye, bears the mark of one man, Albert R. Broccoli. The Bond films alone would stand as a monumental life's work for any film producer, but they are only one chapter of the remarkable story of a remarkable man. Filmgoers know him as Albert R. Broccoli. To anyone who met him, he was simply known as Cubby. The world of James Bond, of exclusive clubs and elegant surroundings, could not be further removed from the world Cubby Broccoli is born into. Cubby Broccoli's story is the story of the Italian-American experience. It is the story of challenge, hard work, sacrifice, and ultimate success. But most of all, it is the story of the importance of family.
His family were Italian immigrants, and one of the great things about him was that he was proud of where he came from.
Cubby's roots go right back to Calabria in Italy, which is one of the poorest parts of Italy, and a great deal of poverty at the time.
The Calabria region of Italy is known for two things: poverty and a delicate vegetable, broccoli. Cubby Broccoli's family begins emigrating to the United States in the 1870s.
They all had great stories about immigrating to the United States and coming on the boat and seeing the Statue of Liberty and being processed at Ellis Island and coming across then into what was Harlem.
The first of Cubby's relatives to emigrate is his uncle, Pasquale De Sico, who became wealthy by successfully importing broccoli seeds. Soon, Cubby Broccoli's grandmother and his mother, Christina, arrive. Christina marries Giovanni Broccoli, another immigrant from Calabria.
He was a nice man. He was a very gentle, quiet man.
On April the 5th, 1905, Christina gives birth to her second son, Albert.
He was always really proud of showing us where he was born, as just a row of brick apartment houses with exterior fire escapes. And I think he felt that he had really benefited so much from the American dream.
While Cubby's father works as a civil engineer on the Croton Dam in the Catskill Aqueduct, Cubby and his mother, Christina, live on the DeSico farm, where Cubby becomes lifelong friends with his cousin, Pat.
There are only 9 months difference between Cubby and Pat DeSico's ages, and they were brought up on the farm together.
They were friends since they were little tiny kids.
He was really close to Pat. I mean, they were like brothers.
Soon, Pat DeSico finds a nickname for his cousin, Albert.
There was a cartoon character called A.B. Kabibble, who he looked like.
So he said that Uncle Pat gave him that nickname. Actually started by calling him Kabibble, and Kabibble turned into Cubby. He loved people calling him Cubby.
During Cubby's youth, his mother, Christina, takes a job as a cook for famed inventor Harry Norton Marvin. Marvin had helped invent early crank-handled movie cameras and is one of the founders of the Biograph Movie Company. Harry Marvin takes an interest in Albert Broccoli.
And he said to Cubby's mother, "This boy has a lot of talent. He's very artistic, and you ought to see that he goes that way."
Soon, Giovanni Broccoli saves enough to buy his own farm.
And every time I talked to Cubby about it, there would be tears in Cubby's eyes.
All this hard work had gone into cultivating beautiful crops.
Like everything else, the competition was fierce.
The speculators would come around and they'd be, picking up this, looking at it.
They would be offered derisory sums of money for the work that Cubby reckoned they actually drew blood virtually in order to produce.
And if it was a bad season and nobody wanted your produce, you dumped it instead of taking it home.
The thing that kept returning in his narrative would be his memory of his mother on her knees in appalling heat, pulling out the weeds between the furrows of the crops.
He would talk about her with enormous affection and love.
She was a great example for him.
Cubby's mother was a great lady, and she could tell wonderful stories. You know, as kids growing up, we'd be in bed at night, and she'd tell these very dramatic stories, all in Italian, of course.
Fabulous, fabulous storyteller, you know.
And I've always thought that Cubby inherited his storytelling ability from Chris.
Because of his mother, he never had any sort of concerns about women's abilities to do anything. He understood how strong they were.
It's obvious from the very beginning that Cubby was determined to give his mother a better life.
He was up in the morning in the fields and then had to walk to school and worked in the fields when he came home.
He would always say, if you're prepared to work hard and follow a dream, you'll get there. And I think that's why the Lindbergh moment was such a seminal moment in his life.
My father was working in the fields.
When he was cranking the Fordson tractor just after dawn,
he heard this put, 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 put noise, and he looked up. And in the sky, he saw the Spirit of St. Louis.
It flew over and he waved.
And Lindbergh waved to him.
And for Cubby, it had this psychological effect.
In America, anything was possible.
You know, if he can do it, I can do it. His strength came from that moment when he said, look, I know I can do it.
Soon, tragedy strikes.
Cubby's father had a massive heart attack after just having this farm for a short time.
After his father's death, the family embarks on a new farming venture in Florida.
That was in the very, rural part, so to speak, near Lake Okeechobee.
This place in Florida was a horrid piece of soil.
The swamps were snake-infested and full of problems.
And they worked for 2 years getting this soil to a condition where they could plant.
After all the hard work, Cubby and his partners watch as their first crop is destroyed by blight, and their second is destroyed by a hurricane.
And he lost his shirt down in Florida.
Cubby Broccoli returns from Florida certain of only one thing: he does not want to continue to farm. Cubby's family notices he has two skills. He is good with numbers, and he is a great negotiator. Soon, Cubby is asked to work with his cousin.
When my grandfather came to the United States, he was a carpenter, and he started a casket company.
Jimmy's grandfather started the casket business, but he didn't speak very much English.
My grandfather didn't understand the rules of banking.
So Cubby said, I'll come and I'll help you.
Cubby helped my grandfather build a very successful business in New York.
Meanwhile, Cubby's cousin, Pat, is making a name for himself in the society column.
Well, Pat was probably the most handsome man who walked the earth.
Pat was a bon vivant, a man about town.
Uncle Pat was a legend. He was larger than life.
Pat DeSico was like the left hand to Cubby being the right hand.
And they were a very funny pair.
The two of them got together, and it was just kind of like, like music.
Soon, though, Cubby's cousin Pat decides to leave New York for Hollywood.
Pat DeSico went to Hollywood, and he became an agent.
Pat had taken the town by storm.
Pat said to Cubby, why don't you leave that creepy business and come to Hollywood?
He arrived there, and when Pat invited him into his home, and then there's a ring at the door.
The first person who knocked on the door was Cary Grant. And then Randolph Scott dropped by. Cubby just couldn't believe that he had these people as neighbors.
The next night, his cousin Pat takes Cubby out on the town.
Cubby was waiting for Pat at the bar at the Colony Club. And while he was there, he was twirling a silver dollar. And there was a man nearby who was also twirling a silver dollar.
And he turned to Cubby and he said, heads or tails. And Cubby, who had all the instincts of a gambler, said heads. There was no question about that. He wasn't going to play.
Cubby lost. They played it again, and Cubby lost again.
So the man spun a third dollar, and Cubby said, no, thanks, I've had enough, because $3 at that time was very big money for Cubby.
And then Pat arrived, and he said to the man at the counter, oh, I see that you've met my cousin, Cubby Broccoli. And the man at the bar turned to Cubby, and he said, hi, Cubby, my name is Howard Hughes. And that began a friendship between Cubby and Howard Hughes, which lasted their entire lifetime.
Despite his newfound connections, Cubby has to find a job.
And the job he got was selling beauty supplies in San Francisco.
He amused me. He was described in detail the seedy hotel that he had to check into.
It was a real low point in his life.
A rat would appear on the windowsill of the room.
He said, you know, all I had in the world, the only friend I had, the only person I had to talk to was this rat.
He made an old chum who said he was going to the races, and would he like to go? And Cubby said yes.
He put money on a horse. It was a long shot. And the horse came in.
And Cubby won enough money that day to pay his hotel bill and to take him to Los Angeles.
And everything changed for him again.
He got a job with a very respected jeweler in Beverly Hills.
One day he ended up at MGM with a tray of jewelry for a man called Irving Thalberg.
And Thalberg made a selection, so he got a chance to meet him.
Very elegant, quiet, polite man.
He spoke of Thalberg as being one of the most sensitive people he knew.
You know, that was a high point sort of in his life.
Cubby soon becomes determined to enter the film industry. He speaks to one of Pat DeSico's friends, Joseph Skank, head of 20th Century Fox. Before long, Cubby is working as a third assistant director. Cubby becomes a fixture at the Trocadero Cafe, where he is often seen escorting such beauties as Joan Marsh and Rochelle Hudson. But Cubby marries actress Gloria Blondell.
He was always very complimentary about Gloria Blondell.
Joe Skank offers Cubby a position as assistant director on a Howard Hughes production, The Outlaw, directed by Howard Hawks.
But when Howard Hughes heard about this, he was very upset. He said, I can't do that. I can't hire Cubby. He's a very good friend of mine. I can't give a good friend a job. My studio would be very upset with me. And when Howard Hawks heard about that, who was the director for the film, he said, I want Cubby.
Cubby Broccoli becomes one of the top assistant directors at 20th Century Fox. But soon, Cubby must change gears. World War II breaks out, and Cubby joins the Navy. But the Navy does not waste Cubby Broccoli's talents. He and future producer Ray Stark work together.
They really got to be great friends.
Because they were both in the movie business, they had a lot of contacts, they would get people to do shows for them.
Broccoli and Stark book stars like Bing Crosby, Bob Hope, Dorothy Lamour, Milton Berle, Dinah Shore, and Danny Kaye for Navy shows. Cubby and Gloria Blondell, though fond of each other, find that their partnership does not last. They end their marriage on good terms and remain friends. After the war, Cubby Broccoli wants to get back into movie making.
Pat suddenly wanted to produce a film. He got some money together, and they did a low-budget picture.
Producer-director Irving Allen joins the project. Allen is an Academy Award-nominated filmmaker, but Cubby and Pat have less experience. Cubby becomes the film's production manager.
It was an adventure movie. It was kind of big spectacle and high adventure.
It didn't go anywhere, and it didn't make any money.
With the lackluster success of Avalanche, Cubby returns to sales, if just for one season.
He got a job selling Christmas trees on Wilshire Boulevard.
The Christmas tree lot was beautiful. It was really magical. I was with Michael, my son, who was then 5 years old. And this very dear man came up to us, and we went through every single tree trying to decide which one Michael wanted. This dear man was so patient. Then we finally picked out the right one. And then this man said, can you put a stand on this? I said, no, I don't think so. And he said, that's all right. I'll put it on for you. And that man was Cubby. And we were not to meet again until 15 years later.
But as Cubby Broccoli approaches the age of 40, he decides to try a career that capitalizes on his greatest strength, his way with people. Cubby Broccoli becomes a talent agent and goes to work for Charlie Feldman, head of Famous Artists. Cubby brings famed star Lana Turner to the agency and soon is representing Ava Gardner.
He had a couple of clients, and one of them was Robert Wagner.
I went to MGM with Cubby, and we got thrown out. We went up to the Thalberg building and went in, and the guy on the desk said, you've been barred from the lot.
Cubby said, what? Barred from the lot? He was shocked, you know.
And Cubby had a little bit of a scene with that guy, and they threw us out on the steps of the Thalberg building.
Charlie Feldman was dating a girl that Louis B. Mayer was interested in, and so one of the things that he did was he prevented anyone from Charlie Feldman's agency to enter the studio.
And I thought, well, you know, my career is finished. I've tied up with Cubby Broccoli, and I'm now, in a matter of moments, finished in the industry.
All of this stuff would go on, you know, all about girls. Everything was about getting girls. It's unbelievable.
While developing careers for actors, Cubby's friendship with Irving Allen grows. When Irving Allen needs help financing his next film, Cubby raises the money from his friend, Howard Hughes. Cubby is also creating another close relationship in his life. He meets Nedra Sanders Clark in Palm Springs. Nedra and Cubby marry in 1951. Both are beginning new lives.
Everything was on track and their lives were great and they were very happy.
Cubby soon leaves famous artists, and with Irving Allen, he options a book, The Red Beret.
They saw an opportunity for American filmmakers to go to England.
We had over in this country at the time some of the finest technicians, some of the finest writers, a great reservoir of talent.
Cubby and Irving Allen work hard to get the film off the ground.
Howard Hughes had given Cubby and Irving pre-production money.
With the money, Cubby and Irving Allen hire British writer-director Terence Young to shepherd the development.
Now they had to get a top star. And Alan Ladd was #1 box office in America. And they really wanted Alan. And they tried everything until they really gave him a tremendous amount of money. And then suddenly he said yes, he would do it. And they made a 3-picture deal.
Once signed, Alan Ladd asked for writer Richard Maybaum to work on the screenplay. But when Hughes backs out at the last minute, Cubby and Irving Allen make a hasty deal with Columbia Pictures. When the deal is finally completed, Irving Allen and Cubby Broccoli meet at Cubby's apartment in New York's Warwick Hotel. They form a company which will change the face of British movies in the 1950s, Warwick. When The Red Beret is released in 1952, it breaks box office records in England, and under the title Paratrooper, it is a huge success in the United States.
The movie was a smash in England and America, and they went on to make 2 more films with Alan, which were very, very successful.
And when you look at those films, most of them are big, exciting action-adventure films with all the elements that later on worked so incredibly well within the whole James Bond franchise.
Cubby had exotic locations in all of his films, beautiful girls, interesting stories, and he brought all of this into the making of the Bond films.
Cubby Broccoli and Irving Allen suddenly find they are players.
I think of them in terms of being one of the first independents who really sort of put the name independent on the map.
Movies took you places that you would never, ever go to, and you met people you would never meet in a million years. He loved that sense of adventure. I think that's why you look at most all of his films are all big adventure films.
Soon Warwick is producing 3 to 4 films a year, giving Cubby and Irving unqualified success. For Cubby, it has been a long journey.
He would say, it took me a long time to know what I wanted to do. It took me a long time to become successful.
Cubby and Nedra have a new life in London, but want to add to their happiness. They decide to start a family.
She actually couldn't have children. She was told by the doctor.
And so they adopted my brother Tony.
And they adopted him before he was born. Truly a gift and a new baby in their lives, and they were very happy.
And then she got pregnant.
And here I am. She had me.
She was an easy lady to get along with. She was a good mother, and everything was fine until this dreadful thing happened to her.
She found out she had cancer.
We all knew it was terminal. She would never admit it, though. I think she knew, but she would never use the word cancer.
She didn't live very long after that, just months.
And she died in New York.
And that must have been a very, traumatic thing for Dad.
He was devastated, of course, and he had the 2 children.
So he was, in his late 40s, a widower with 2 little children.
While consoling his two children, Cubby receives bad news from his business partner, Irving Allen.
He was very interested in the James Bond books, and he wanted to get the film rights, and he had apparently talked to Irving, and Irving was supposed to negotiate or see whether they could get the option to the books.
At a meeting with Fleming, Fleming's agent, and Ned McLean, Allen is clearly uninterested. He later tells Cubby that Fleming's books are not even good enough for television.
So it didn't work out. And I think he was clearly very disappointed.
Poor Cubby went through absolute hell. And I was a little girl, seeing him suffer through this pain. It was just awful.
He didn't collapse. He brought his life back together again.
Soon, Cubby meets a woman who heals his emotional wounds.
She was just stunning. Stunningly gorgeous. She modeled in New York City.
Dana had been an actress. She acted on the Boston stage, the New York stage, and did a lot of summer stock, and that was where she met her first husband, Lewis Wilson.
Lewis Wilson was the original Batman for Columbia Pictures.
They married, and they had Michael Wilson, who's my half-brother.
Then they got involved in television and movies.
I did a few films, and I did a series called Craig Kennedy Detective. And then when my husband went off to war, I decided that I would try writing. And I was fortunate enough to get my very first book published. Being separated with the war for 5 years just changed everything. And when my husband returned, we were two entirely different people. It was inevitable that we would divorce.
On New Year's Eve, 1958, Dana Wilson is reintroduced to Cubby Broccoli.
A friend of mine invited me to a New Year's Eve party in Las Vegas, and I went. And while I was waiting in the hotel lobby, there was a friend of mine who was with Cubby. They were going to a different party, so we only met for a few minutes. But then 2 days later, we met again in a restaurant in Beverly Hills. Then I had to go off to New York. And the next thing I know is that Cubby arrived in New York and was calling hotels to find out where I was. So we met. And after 2 dates, we really knew that there was something very special between us.
They liked each other from the very beginning.
They had a whirlwind romance.
After dinner one night, when Cubby was dropping me off at the house, he said, suddenly, out of nowhere, "Dana, would you marry me?" It just took my breath away. We'd only known each other for 5 weeks. And I said, "Well, Cubby, I just didn't know how to answer him." And I said, "Don't you think it would be better if I came to Europe and I met your children and we would take it from there?" He said, "That's not what I asked you. I asked you if you would marry me." And I said, "Yes, Cubby, yes, I will marry you."
Cubby has one more person to convince before the wedding.
He said, "I only have one hurdle now. I've got to see how your son Michael feels about this."
Cubby said, I'm planning to marry Dana and want to make sure you were comfortable with that. And I said, "Well, that's great, but are you sure you know what you're getting into, because she's a very independent-minded woman."
And they got along famously, right from the start.
On June the 20th, Cubby, Dana, Michael Wilson, and Cary Grant prepare for the wedding the next day.
Cubby and I kind of stayed up, and we got to the crap tables, because Cubby loved to play craps.
The next morning, Cary Grant visits Dana before the ceremony.
Cary came in to see me just before the wedding, and he said, "Your groom has a hangover, your son has a hangover, and I'm the only one to talk any sense."
And he turned to my mother just before the ceremony and said, "I did a film once where the best man ran off with the bride. How about it?"
And I laughed. And I said, "Well, as tempting as it may sound, I don't think it's going to happen this time."
For Cubby Broccoli, the wedding is the start of his second chance at happiness, love, and a family. He knows from the start that Dana is the woman he wants to share his life with, and now she is his wife.
He was very, very grateful to my mother for coming into his life at that time.
After a short stay in California, Cubby and Dana fly to London, where she enters a new world.
I married Cubby, and my life changed completely. I left my home in California. I left my country. I left my friends. I left everything that was familiar to me. And most of all, I left my mother and my young son, who was just entering college. And I followed Cubby to London, where I was to meet a whole new group of people, 2 young children, and his whole way of life. But I followed Cubby, and I trusted him, and I knew he was going to make everything all right.
Soon, Cubby and Irving Allen launch another film, The Trials of Oscar Wilde.
The Trials of Oscar Wilde is an absolutely wonderful film. It stands up today as well as the day it was made. Peter Finch was never better.
Cubby and Irving Allen take a big risk. They decide to finance and distribute the film themselves.
That film was an artistic triumph. It was well reviewed and got a lot of foreign awards.
Don't you weep for your son? The only real male son you ever bore? Really, Father? The only real man among the 3 of you?
What should have been the definitive success of Cubby's career turned out to be a major disaster.
Oscar Fingal O'Flaherty Wills Wilde, being a male person, unlawfully did commit acts of gross indecency with another male person.
The subject matter proves too controversial for some.
Because it dealt with Oscar Wilde's homosexuality.
Did you ever kiss him, Mr. Wilde?
He was given the condemned rating by the Legion of Decency.
Oh dear, no. He was extremely ugly.
Which meant that it couldn't be advertised, it couldn't go into films, it was on the restrictive list.
And what, Mr. Wilde, is the love that dare not speak its name?
It couldn't get a general release in America.
So very few theaters would play the picture.
Mr. Wilde, I'm most dreadfully sorry about this, sir, but I'm afraid we must ask you to leave.
It had been opened in New York during Yom Kippur week.
The place was virtually empty, and he sat up in the balcony and cried.
And it never got its money back.
He and Irving Allen put their own money into it, and so it was a tremendous financial setback.
Cubby and Irving were very close to bankruptcy. It was the first year we were married. It was a terrible time for Cubby. He lost his money. He didn't know which way to go or what to do. His partnership with Irving had broken up. And he just walked the floor every night. He was in terrible trouble. And I discovered that I was pregnant with Barbara.
In June 1960, Cubby and Dana's daughter, Barbara, is born. But for Cubby, the future is uncertain. He spends months trying to get various film projects off the ground. Nothing seems to be coming together.
I asked Cubby if there was anything he really wanted to do. And he said yes. I've always wanted to do the Ian Fleming books.
When Cubby tells writer Wolf Mankiewicz he wants to produce films of the James Bond novels, Wolf informs Cubby that he knows the man who holds the option, Harry Saltzman.
Harry said, I haven't been able to sell this anywhere. And Cubby said, well, I would like to pick up your option. And Harry said, well, I don't want to sell the option. I really want to go into business with you. I know you've been very successful. So together they started a partnership.
He'd been through tragedy and a very hard time, and he was bankrupt, and James Bond suddenly came into his life.
With the film rights to his dream project in hand, Cubby and his new partner must now find financing.
Cubby said, well, we got to go to New York. So we went to New York to meet with Arthur Krim, who was the head of United Artists.
An hour later, they have a deal to make the first James Bond film, Dr. No.
Cubby was so excited, and he was out with my mother celebrating, and he said, let's drink a toast to James Bond, and terrific and everything. She said, would you have another toast you want to make? And he said, yeah, let's drink to toast to the baby, to Barbara, because I had just had my first birthday. And she said, anything else? He said, oh, no, you know. And she said, well, how about drinking to our anniversary? He called the maitre d' over and he said, "My wife has gone to the ladies' room and I want to have a cake that says Happy Anniversary Dana on it by the time she gets back. Do you understand?" And sure enough, he managed it. He never forgot his anniversary again, that's for sure.
James series ever.
The mere fact that we were lucky to stumble upon Ian Fleming and Bond was a bit of good fortune. The rest was all hard work.
They turned this character into the world's most popular cinematic creation.
Bond. James Bond.
You must have the huge sets, the huge quality, the bizarre.
With James Bond comes financial security, creative power, and for Cubby Broccoli, a limitless capacity to enjoy it all.
My father loved what he did. He loved making movies. And I think Harry did as well. And I think they just went for it.
Cubby's partnership with Dana is a keystone to his success.
There was always a great chemistry, you know, you could see between them.
I think all the major decisions that he made, he discussed with her. It was a real partnership.
Cubby did talk to me about everything, but everything we talked about was after hours at home, and that worked out very well.
For Cubby Broccoli, it is also important to always recognize James Bond's creator.
Dad felt very strongly that the film should always say in Ian Fleming's James Bond 007. He never wanted to make a film without having Ian Fleming's name on it.
The James Bond films give Cubby Broccoli the clout to make any films he desires, but he sticks with 007, with one exception. In 1968, Cubby produces his last non-Bond film.
Cubby loved children, and we were very excited about doing a film for children.
So when he came to making Chitty Chitty Bang Bang, I think he was just thrilled. You know, I mean, it's a wonderful story, again, written by Ian Fleming.
Chitty bang bang, chitty chitty bang bang, chitty bang bang, chitty chitty bang bang, chitty bang bang, chitty chitty bang bang. Oh, you pretty.
To bring Fleming's story to life as a musical, Cubby wants the songwriters from Mary Poppins, Richard and Robert Sherman, who happened to be under contract to Walt Disney.
We wrote exclusively for Walt Disney, except for the exception of doing Chitty Chitty Bang Bang for Cubby Broccoli. We went outside the studio for that.
We got released permission.
We got permission from Walt to do that, really. He liked the idea.
He liked Cubby, too.
He had a great love for his work. He really did. He had enormous largesse in how he produced things and how he took care of you. And he did believe in luxury.
It was fun for him to do a children's picture and, you know, to have all the wonderful people involved, with Gert Frober and Desmond Llewellyn and Ken Adam, and, you know, all his trusted, treasured friends.
After 14 years, Harry Saltzman and Cubby Broccoli end their partnership, leaving Cubby as the sole producer of the James Bond films.
The reason we have confidence in Bond is that we have a ready-made audience out there waiting to see a Bond film.
Through the decades, the audience for the James Bond films continues to grow, and each film continues the tradition of record-breaking success.
When success came, big time, he enjoyed it, and he wanted to take everybody along.
And it didn't make any difference where you came from, what walk of life, or anything like that.
He wanted everyone to enjoy his success.
He'd always give a great tip, and I'd say, wow, that's an outrageous tip. And he'd say, remember this, for every $1 you give away, you'll get 100 back. And for every buck you steal, you'll lose 1,000.
Cubby finds himself building another partnership closer to home.
Cubby was the greatest influence on my life of anyone. Cubby took me right under his wing and let me be involved in all the elements of the production.
Soon, Cubby's youngest daughter works her way up the ladder.
I enjoyed spending the time that I had with my father. I mean, and watching the way he and Michael did things.
In 1982, Cubby is honored by his peers at the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences with the Irving Thalberg Award.
When he found out he was going to get the Irving Thalberg Award, he was very moved by that.
I thank the Academy for allowing a farm boy from Long Island to realize this dream.
For Hollywood to honor Cubby like that meant a great deal to him, to all of us. It was like one of the great nights of his entire career.
This is an important moment in my life. I feel a great sense of accomplishment, not only for myself, but for all my colleagues with whom I've worked over the years.
It was a tremendous honor, you know, for Dad.
I never dreamed when I came to Hollywood in 1934 that I'd be standing here to receive an award from a man who was the idol of all of us.
As the Bond films continue their success throughout the 1980s, Cubby is honored by Queen Elizabeth with the Order of the British Empire.
It was a recognition of Cubby's contribution to England and the economy and the film industry.
In 1990, Cubby Broccoli receives his star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. For Cubby, though, the greatest reward remains watching his films with an audience.
He would love to go in the back of a theater, it was packed, and just hear the audience enjoying themselves. That was the reason why he made the films. He loved making them, and he loved watching people enjoy them.
He made making films an enjoyable experience, and he made going to films an enjoyable experience.
He knew everyone's name, they all knew him.
He made people believe in themselves.
Cubby really loved filmmaking, and he especially loved all the people he worked with. He was very caring of each and every one of them. If people had problems, he tried to help them solve it.
He was forever giving people that wanted to come up in the business a break.
He had so much to give, and he gave it. He gave it all.
Throughout the years, despite awards and box office records, Cubby's focus remains on the most important aspect of his life, his family.
Cubby was basically a family man, and his happiness came from watching his children and his grandchildren. That to him was his happiness. And then, of course, when we met a man called Ian Fleming, and we stepped into the incredible world of James Bond, that was just something extra and special and wonderful. And it's been an incredible journey, and that journey is still going on.
At the age of 86, Cubby Broccoli undergoes major heart surgery. GoldenEye becomes the first James Bond film without Cubby on the set. Michael Wilson and Barbara Broccoli continue the legacy.
I remember one time he said to me, you know, the most important thing is don't let him screw it up. You know, and it sounds like it's a really simple thing, but it was the thing he had done his whole life with Bond, was just not let outside forces screw it up.
On June the 27th, 1996, Cubby Broccoli, one of the most successful motion picture producers in history, passes away. Just as Cubby decided no Bond film would be made without Ian Fleming's name, Cubby's family decides no Bond film will be made without the name Albert R. Broccoli.